All right, Eric Schwartz, good to see you today. I'm Brett Kinsella, host of GAIN, the Generative AI News Rundown. And this is where we get together every week and we talk about the top generative AI and synthetic media stories of the week. We've been doing this now for 7 weeks. This is our 7th edition. And it's just been getting better each week. There's just so much news. Just in terms of background, I'm the founder of Nvidia and Voicebot.ai. Eric Schwartz is the head writer at Voicebot.ai. He's been doing this for like 4 years. He's written more stories on AI than anyone. Welcome, Eric.
Yes. And every week, more stories to discuss than the week before.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to talk about a lot of things. We have a very busy schedule this week. We're going to talk about Nvidia, a couple different things from Google. They've actually been making some move here. We'll do a quick flyby on OpenAI because there's one thing that's worth touching on. Midjourney, we didn't get to that last week. It sort of came out right before our GAIN last week, but we just had a packed schedule again last week. We're also going to hit on Microsoft Bing. They've got something that came out, new feature. TikTok has some new rules. Roblox and Unity have been talking about generative AI. LinkedIn, SoundHound. We'll see what we can get to. We're going to try to make sure we, cover a lot of ground, but maybe give you a little bit of depth as well. Shout out to Dave Gerbino's here. He's with us on YouTube. Michael Stanisławic, Silke Hahn is here. Oh, Silke was supposed to be my guest this week, but I guess I probably didn't do a good enough job. Silke actually broke the story about GPT-4 coming out last week. So Silke, sorry we didn't coordinate effectively this week. We were trying to do this by LinkedIn. We'll do this better next week or maybe the week after. We'll have you in. Okay, folks, really excited to be here. And I think that we should start with the top story of the week. And at least from my perspective, it's Nvidia. Some people already knew that Nvidia is a giant of generative AI because they're running most of the workloads. They're the biggest producer of GPUs out there, which most of the AI training and inference runs on. And they also have the Omniverse platform, which lets a lot of different software packages work together. And they've created some of the most powerful generative AI models out there. A lot of people hadn't seen some of the image models that they've created, but those are taking a step up right now. And they have Megatron, which they created. I think that was in conjunction with Microsoft Research at one point, but that's actually taken a step up. So I'm going to hit on a couple of things here. So first of all, Picasso. So if you think that our friends at Nvidia are just hanging back and building GPUs, well, that's incorrect. They are also running a service where you can do one of three things. If you already have, like if you're Wombo or Runway and you already have a generative AI image model, they'll help you run it and optimized infrastructure. If you don't have a model, but you have data, if you're like Getty or Shutterstock, you can bring your data and they'll help you train your own foundation model. And then you can use that. You won't be relying on somebody's third-party service. Or if the third thing is if you have your own model, I'm sorry, what is the third one? Third one's if you don't have your own model, yeah, but you can use a third-party model like DALL-E or Stable Diffusion, but you need help training it, they'll help you fine-tune it and then host it and accelerate it. So let's talk Picasso first. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's genuinely impressive. I mean, as you said, NVIDIA's been such an important player, but a sort of relatively quiet player in generative AI, and now they're really making a more public splash. So they're really saying, hey, we're not only the power and the GPUs behind things, but we're also going to connect models, provide the services, the data, and the AI itself to help companies and people create the very synthetic media that has been so prominent in the news. So it's not just that they have these tools now, it's that they've already scored some pretty big names as partners to help to use their tools and to really make it so that they become as much of a mainstay in the actual synthetic media space as they are in the powering of generative AI models.
Absolutely. And we should show people too, they've got these 3 new models. It might not be that easy to see with their architecture, but they have these eDifd-I models. So first of all, they're competing directly with hosting services right now because they're providing their own hosting service. But they're also providing models. They call them the eDifd-I models, and there's 3 versions of them. There's text to image, text to video, and text to 3D. And text to image, they're doing with Getty. Getty's their announced partner with that, or their first customer. I think they may have others. Shutterstock is using their text to 3D. So they are competing directly with Stable Diffusion, certainly with DALL-E's service. Stable Diffusion being that I own, but also Stability AI's version. So I think that's really interesting. And they didn't stop there. If we scroll down a little bit, we can talk about Nemo Megatron. That is a large language model, 530 billion parameters. That's maybe 40% larger than GPT-3. And we're not sure about GPT-4. We talked about that. And that, again, is a new service that people can use to build their own solutions with Nvidia, as opposed to using GPT-4 or something like that. And they can do, they can customize it and fine tune it just like they can otherwise. So in other words, what they're doing is they're actually putting in place the features that that OpenAI already has to make it easy for developers to use the model.
Yeah, and they're bringing with them OpenAI obviously has Microsoft's backing, but Nvidia has its own enormous infrastructure for software and for all these sort of computing power intensive projects, and it can really go to a company and say that they have these tools, and the company doesn't have to question, oh, but are you going to be able to sustain it, or who's your cloud partner? I mean, they are working with cloud partners, but they're making a point of staying relatively agnostic. They're working with Microsoft in some things, Google in some things, even Amazon to a certain extent. I think they're trying to maintain their presence as using or being able to work with everybody, and therefore not limiting themselves in any way in terms of their market share.
Absolutely. And it was really interesting because we actually interviewed a vice president, a product manager over there. And I said, this is really interesting. Thanks for giving us all the new detail. You're competing directly with some people that are your partners now. How does that work? And they're like, oh, no, we're not competing. I said, well, aren't you offering the same service? Well, yes, of course. Yes, we are. So maybe that's not competing in some ways. But I think it's really fascinating that NVIDIA said, hey, listen, we've done all this work. We're just not going to sit on the sidelines anymore. We're going to put our hat in the ring. And I think that this will be some competition for OpenAI, but I think the bigger issue probably is companies like Google, who are trying to start their process right now, and they're going to start it in a much more crowded market.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that although Google is now rushing to catch up, when OpenAI had been making its partnership announcements, they always made a point of saying, except for some things with Microsoft, nothing else was ever exclusive. It was always about making a deal that left things open. And I don't know if Nvidia was necessarily a name on their mind at the time, but it definitely made things a lot easier for Nvidia to at least support or complement whatever OpenAI was doing, if not outright.
Yeah, and I think they probably will get away with it. I mean, it's like you're paying for your competition because you're using all their hardware, and then now they've got this cloud service and they've got these other things. But I think it makes sense. I think it's good for the market to have more choice. And by the way, I mean, like the feedback on the Megatron model, what they call Nemo, they're just calling Nemo for short now. That's actually been very good. So I think it's going to be competitive. They actually are rolling out, well, officially they're rolling out 3 models, 8 billion, 43 billion, and 530 billion. But actually, we were on a call with Jensen Huang, the CEO, yesterday, and he said there's actually a 4th model somewhere in between those, the 64 and the 530. So 3 or 4 models are going to be out there. And one of the things you care about is like the larger models might have better performance, but they actually take more system resources, there's more latency, all these things that actually make a difference when you get into when you get into actually the application space. Now, Silky Han said, hey, there's a fourth way that people are doing this, is you can actually run this on device as well. That's going to be a new service, and that's true. The person that we interviewed from the product team at Nvidia said, particularly that 8 billion model, which was trained on 1 trillion tokens, by the way. A lot of people think of parameters and they don't think of the number of tokens. The trillion tokens is going to be probably 60, or no, actually 2.5 times the number of data tokens that I think, or maybe it's just 35. I forget the number. It's 35% more data tokens than GPT-3 was trained on. We don't know the numbers for GPT-4, but Megatron put those out. So yes, you'll be able to run on device too. Nvidia made a lot of other things. They've got new GPUs, new TPUs, for the processing side. They've got new Omniverse features, but in general, a lot going on in this space, and they are not going to settle for just being the hardware provider.
Yeah, that's not even touching their medical generative AI projects.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. That would be a whole other thing that we could talk about. Okay, so I think we just hit 11 minutes on that, so we probably should move on to the next story, unless you have any closing thoughts on NVIDIA.
No, just that I expect to be writing about them generative AI a lot more going forward.
Yeah, so it still remains to be seen whether they can be the giant in the application space, the model space that they are in the TPU and GPU space. But I think they're going to be pretty formidable. And I think they're going to be a partner that a lot of third parties who actually have their own models are going to want to work with, just because of the resources they bring to bear. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about, I guess we'll talk about Bard first. There's 2 announcements from Google. Google Bard, there's a couple things that I thought were interesting. First of all, you have access to this now. If you're not familiar with that, I'll put links in the show notes so that people can sign up for that. I do not have access yet. I've used the old LaMDa version through Test Kitchen, so I've not seen Bard, but I've seen a lot of people showing what they've done. But let's just talk about the way Google is showing this. So first of all, they put something in the wild as opposed to just saying, hey, something exists. So kudos to Google for starting to put something out there. Alan Furstenberg's like Bard. He's got the sleeping Z's for sleeping and snoring. A couple things I think are really interesting. First of all, what they did is there's disclaimers everywhere. So if you think about it, I'm Bard, your generative or your creative and helpful collaborator. I have limitations and won't always get it right. Actually, this is the same type of disclaimer that is on the Bing chat page, has been on ChatGPT from the start. Google really wasn't spending a lot of time talking about that, but I think they learned their lesson by getting something wrong in their initial launch. But I said, oh, we have to tell people that this might not be the Google you expect, the Google that's right and gives you the best source, high quality and accurate all the time.
Yeah, I think it's telling that because not that Google search has ever been 100% perfect or incapable of making mistakes, but it has built up over the years a certain cachet of, if it's not 100% right, something on the first page will get you to whatever you're trying to get to. And to have errors like that with the name Google, they want to make sure that people understand that that's because it's still a work in progress, not lessen the value of their brand. But I think they've been simultaneously working hard behind the scenes and also rushing to get stuff out. I mean, we saw reports about manual corrections being made to the bar. Yes. We saw them being Google encouraging employees to spend hours and hours a week working on it or engaging with it and spotting problems. I mean, the fact that they're putting it out now, even though they feel the need to spend half their announcement talking about how it's not very good sometimes, is indicative of that. But I think they also understand that at the moment, at least, people, they may be annoyed or find it fun when generative AI chatbots get things wrong, but they're not at the stage of thinking this is a problem, you need to fix it right now. They're more willing to accept the concept that it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, really interesting too. And then the other thing that I take out of this, and it's funny because it wasn't just Alan Mikkel, laugh out loud. Bashir is saying surprisingly unimpressive. By the way, you can make comments too and get shout outs if you join us at noon Eastern time on Thursdays. That's when we're doing the Gain Show. It does look actually fairly unimpressive, the outputs that we've seen. And so I have this theory that LaMDa may be on the way out. So LaMDa was designed as ChatGPT before there was a ChatGPT, but there is some language in there that they're going to LaMDa will be updated with newer, more capable models over time. Now, GPT-3 got updated several times. ChatGPT has actually been updated since it launched. I mean, this is a common thing, and you're just updating your own foundation model, and it might be a significant update like a GPT 3.5 from 3, even more significant to GPT 4. But I think the way they wrote this, it actually got me to start thinking, why are they not using Palm? And is this an opening for them to use Palm? I think this might be something that Palm is what they're using for the other announcement of this week. They're not using LaMDa for that. And it's got really good reviews. It's a larger model. It might be the thing that they need to do. They just need to tune it for the chat use case.
Yeah, I think you can tell where Google's putting their resources based on, with the where they discuss these sort of experimental projects versus where they're putting their enterprise efforts. The projects that really bring in actual money or that set up long-term revenue streams. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think it's also notable that Palm is where they're testing out interactions with robots, with more sort of practical AI conversations. I think that's, at the moment at least, that seems to be what they're more interested in, with LaMDa being either sort of a side project or possibly, as you said, abandoned entirely in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm just laying it out here. I put it in the newsletter. I'm saying it here. I think there's a high likelihood that LaMDa gets replaced with some sort of tuned version of Palm. Maybe they even call it LaMDa again, but I don't think they will, because Palm is a different architecture, the Pathways architecture, which I believe that Google has figured out might be better. And one of the places they're using that is in the new the Palm model in the new workspace. They keep changing the name. It used to be G Suite, something before that, but it's Google Docs, Gmail. We talked about this earlier. They now have generative AI capabilities. They're using Palm, and the Maker Suite tools for developers also support Palm. I don't think they support LaMDa, so I think that's also an interesting idea. But the big news is, I think, twofold. One is the workspace upgrades with generative AI. That's sort of countering what's going on with Office 365 Copilot from Microsoft, although not as impressive. Really just a few features that you would expect in some of these tools, and not the system with the grounding and the modified prompts and those types of things that Microsoft is pushing. But very interesting that they rolled this out this week, and they are taking, I've heard that people aren't getting access to it yet, but I'm sure some people are. They do have some trusted testers who are getting access to Maker Suite and Palm.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, the Palm and Maker Suite are both for bringing generative AI to companies. It's what the Maker Suite especially is the low code approach, which means that it's supposed to be for all these companies that don't necessarily have like a large technical team or any technical coders. I think again, it's hard to tell sometimes how much of this is. It's not that Google didn't have these projects in the works, but how much of this is being rushed out because of the realization that this is the hot moment for generative AI, and if everyone immediately adopts what OpenAI and Microsoft are doing, or even some of the other companies like Nvidia are doing, then Google won't have any place to stand, and they'd rather have an incomplete project out there now, even though they may have been working on the assumption that it was better to wait and make sure they had a perfect project before putting it out to the public and to the companies who provide an important revenue stream for them.
Yeah, and Soki-Han, thank you very much. He's adding it for those of you who are not in LinkedIn right now. If you're watching on YouTube, on LinkedIn, this is also going live, and Soki and a bunch of people are over in LinkedIn as well. And she's been putting some links in also around the Palm announcement, which would require more time to talk about as well, but also very interesting. Okay, so that's Google. Google actually is starting to show some things, but they're starting to also show that they're behind, which I think was one of the things they feared. But at this point, they're just going to move forward with making sure that they're in the market, they're a choice, and they can start moving forward. And I think that's a good thing. One other thing, we'll just talk about OpenAI very quickly because we always talked about OpenAI. They shut down ChatGPT this week. Did anybody notice? I noticed. I was trying to get in, and that was true for not just for free users, but it was also true for paid users. The issue was they had a bug that somehow people might be able to see other people's chat threads or their search
titles of it.
Yeah, titles of their search sentences, and they thought that might be a privacy issue. So people are still using it. People are trying to break into it, or people are, seeing that there's flaws. And so I thought that was very interesting. But something we didn't get to last week, I want to talk about. I want to shift from the large language models back to images. We started with images with Nvidia and Picasso, but Midjourney 5's out. And it's pretty amazing if you think about it. The images, particularly the photorealistic images, are much better than they used to be.
Yeah, it's astonishing. Just in a couple of years from when Midjourney became publicly available to now, I mean, the value I can see of Midjourney now versus even a year ago is it jumped enormously, and it's sort of a joke among people who have been playing around with these kinds of tools, but you can tell they've made real improvements because hands now look like hands. They have usually the right number of fingers in the right places. It's for whatever reason that became a real indicator of how well a text image generator performs, and Midjourney 5 has hit that point now where it's not that it will never get it wrong, but you don't have to try to avoid having images of hands in your image, in your picture to make it look good.
Coherence, detail, photorealism, I think, are the biggest things. Like people who are the geeks, like Andrew, who are working in this every day. They love the new aspect ratio features as well. You'll be able to select those. You can actually some really cool things you can do with the odd aspect ratios now that you can control that a little bit more. I have to say, so first of all, this has gotten a lot better. So that's the first thing. And I actually said, geez, like Midjourney 3 I thought was great. Amazed. I'm kind of amazed again, but I don't know, if I think about this, what we're doing is we're actually just we're making more incremental improvements. We're fixing the problems as opposed to just generating the new great feature. And I think that's the right thing because this space has matured so quickly.
Yeah. And Mikhail's comment just now about how you have to be more intentional. I think he's absolutely right. I think that you have to think more about not just having more adjectives or more descriptive terms, but also the nuances of those descriptive terms, I think, matter more now. Playing around a little bit with like times of day, you can change a lot with, it's not just, morning, noon, and night. It's 10 o'clock a.m. versus 11 o'clock a.m. I actually did see a slight difference in the lighting. And so I think you have to plan ahead a little more if you want to get a very specific image, or you could be more open to seeing what it comes up with. I think I think there's a lot of room for creativity, but I also think that people who the kind of people who can envision something but have no capability of putting pen to paper or creating it in some other way will have a lot more opportunity to really bring what's in their head to life.
Absolutely. Okay, and just that last picture was maybe harder to see for those of you who are listening in the podcast. You won't see this, but you can always look at the video, which is online in Voicebot's YouTube channel. Just look at that photorealism. It's like a young girl in the plains of the Kalahari holding a meerkat. This is something I don't think that has ever existed before. Maybe it's happened. Maybe meerkats have been have domesticated, but I'm not sure. But it's like it is pretty stunning. Actually, one of the things I really like is the shots one of the artists has been doing through glass. So you get these reflections. It's like pretty amazing.
I mean, we made that cookbook with Midjourney 1 or 2 iterations ago, and the food images were pretty good. But now I would feel comfortable having images of people cooking the food itself, and I feel like it could come out pretty well.
All right. So in the same vein, TechCrunch has this article here. I haven't written about this yet. I don't think you have either. Microsoft brings the image creator to the new Bing. And there's a reason I haven't written about it yet. It doesn't work. but let me tell you like something fascinating here. So first of all, yesterday I gave it time. A couple different times I've tried to do it and it says it won't do it. It's like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm a large language model, which is interesting. I'll come back to that in a second. Another time it did try to it acted like it was trying to create it, like took all the parameters, it showed me on the screen with the chat saying it's going to do this. I gave up at 27.5 minutes. I had to shut it down because I was doing something else. But so that might have just been a processing error, but I think in general, this is not available or because I have the latest version of the Edge browser. I'm in the program with this. So now here's the interesting thing. I just asked Bing Chat why it wasn't working and it gave me all these reasons. Oh, it's only available to certain types of people. I'm like, well, I have the latest Edge browser. I'm in the program. Why isn't it available? I said, oh, I'm so sorry that this is a problem. Maybe you should contact customer support. Gave me the praying hand sign. I was like, wow, this is interesting because I was like having this problem with it where it kept saying it doesn't do it. And I'm like, no, it should do it. And I actually included the URL saying, here's the announcement from the blog that it is. And it actually came back and started to think about what I was saying or think about it. It started to recognize what I was saying and then changed its tack and looked a lot like a customer service chatbot all of a sudden.
I was about to say, this is why the people who run contact centers and customer service projects are excited about it, because this sort of incremental conversation is what generative AI chatbots are very good at. They can process and respond to much wider variety of circumstances and have better answers. And then, of course, if it's totally impossible, it will tell you to talk to a human being. But I think both I'm not surprised that Bing is putting DALL-E in there. I'm also not surprised it's not working very well right now. I think that there's going to be a huge demand on that. But I do think that it's great that it's telling you why it may not work.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. So if someone has access to Bard right now, I'll do that when I get access, but it'd be very interesting when it won't do something you want it to do. Use it as a chat bot to see if it can put you into customer service. The fact that it's doing that may just be an emergent behavior, or it might be something that Microsoft thought about ahead of time and sort of built that in as a feature. But I thought that was really fast. I think I'm the first person to actually to identify that and talk about it here right now live, so you guys can hear about it too. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is synthetic media deepfake policy. Isn't that exciting? Okay, so I just want to bring this up for a second. This digital forgeries, I'll read it out. So this is the policy by TikTok about synthetic media. So digital forgeries, synthetic media, or manipulated media that mislead users by distorting the truth of events and cause significant harm to the subject of the video, other persons, or society. So this is do not post. This is like something that you cannot do. All right. So that's the policy that's been in place since December 2020. And before that, there was one in 2021, but it was slightly shorter, but it was basically the same sentence. They just added some on it. All right, so that's one sentence. The policy that is expected to go into place in the beginning of April is much longer. And it talks about a lot of different types of things. And so if you think about it, like there's 1, 2, 3, there's like 4 paragraphs, and then there's 7 or 8 bullet points on what you can and can't do for those people who are listening. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit more about this. So they had this sort of generalized idea of what you could and couldn't do before. But now it's very specific. So first of all, they want you to be able to do this, but they do want you to label it potentially. More importantly, what they're telling you can't do. You can't have a synthetic media of anything with people who are under 18, whether they're public or private people, private persons at all. So you can't do something because they're really worried about like things that might harm people who are not in the public eye. For people who are in the public eye, you can do things with them. Like one of the examples is a famous dance or something like that with some sort of deepfake version of a public figure doing this type of new TikTok dance. But you can't do it if it's looks like it's endorsing something, and that might be a product or a cause or something like that. Worried about these types of things, but really interesting. We've had significant advancements in deepfakes. This is synthetic voices. This is obviously the talk tracks through large language models, but also the visuals of these over the past year. And TikTok is jumping on this and is being much more specific about what they can do. Some people think it's because that there's this risk that they're going to be banned. We've heard this before with TikTok, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's important and makes sense because again, it's easier so to do these kind of things, and we've already seen examples of bad faith actors using this technology to attempt to make others look bad or to make them look like they're doing things that they would never do in real life. But it's also notable that not in every single way, but a lot of the rules TikTok described are also the same guidelines that the Chinese government recently put out, restricting deepfakes in terms of having to make it very clear, having to label it when you're doing it, having to have certain rules about how you use it. I think it's TikTok's trying to walk this fine line of being an international company, but it's still based in China. So if it can adapt Chinese government rules and thereby avoid regulation in other countries, then it wins on both sides. Although some of the other issues it faces may make that a moot point in the US and Europe.
Yeah, there's a nice callback there too. Yeah, we did a story in February about the new rules, which I think were going into effect in March from the Chinese government, and they're much more restrictive than anything that we've seen in the U.S., which is interesting because they're trying. They have a stated goal of being leaders in AI across the board, but they in their own country they're going to be very circumspect about how it's used. Now we've got a few more minutes here. We need to get to the next topic. And that's Roblox. You wrote a story about their new generative AI tools. They made an announcement that this was coming. This was about a month ago. But this week, they started showing some things.
Yeah, a couple of new features in beta, Code Assist and Material Generator. Code Assist being exactly what it sounds like. It if you're a developer who's coding things for the metaverse for Roblox, you can use Code Assist to sort of help fill in the gaps to handle a lot of the more tedious or repetitive coding things. If you code how a certain object should behave, you don't have to code it for every time that object appears. You can just ask for code that will apply to all those kinds of objects and that will generate more of them. And then there's, to me, honestly, more interesting is the material generator, which essentially makes the surfaces of objects behave in a realistic way, so that if it's a metallic substance, light reflects off it in a certain way, and if it's a human or another animal, then it behaves as though it's flesh and rather than stone. And the idea being that not only is it the look, but also all the related elements that make up how material functions, you can code together and have an asset or S4 so that you can make an environment behave exactly how you want and relatively quickly. And I think that as the interest in the metaverse being as much like the real world as people want it to be, I think that's going to be very valuable.
So I think one of the really interesting things about this is the idea that And by the way, Roblox isn't alone in this. I just interviewed for the podcast. It'll be out next week. The head of AI research at Unity, and they have very similar views that they want to have. They want to make it easier for anyone to build a game, and even people who are in the game industry, a lot of them don't have the skills to do a full game or even just prototype a full game, because the people who are really good at designing 3D objects, for oftentimes don't have like the deep skills and that you use to, whether it's C# or Java or Python or whatever it is that they're actually coding the game in. And this idea that they can create the assets and they can improve the assets just by using natural language, and then they can actually say what they want to have happen in the scene, and the procedural code for running the game will actually generate. And then the flip side is a lot of people who are actually good at writing the procedures for the game don't have the skill. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, I don't know if Roblox is like this, but Unity is. Unity has like 500,000 objects in its library, like you can just use as a developer. But then the question is like, how do you find them? And so natural language is a great way just to surface a lot of opportunities as well as generate new things. And I should actually bring that up too. I did have an article here from Reuters. We don't have a story on this yet, but we will as there's more details coming out. There's some cool demos that are not for public release yet, but Unity's CEO actually said at the Game Developers Conference this week that they are adding some generative AI features. They were not that specific, other than to say that there's like a wait list with trusted developers, like we see for all these types of things. But one of the things that they're really interested in addition to sort of this natural language to code generation, is characters. So like NPCs that are based on AI and can interact and talk with the power of something like GPT-3 behind them.
Yeah, and it is funny because sometimes when announcements like this get made and people talk about what they envision the future being like, and it can be very like utopian and seem very unrealistic. But when Roblox talks about how they have an idea of people putting in a few concept drawings and an entire game world being generated from those, it seems much more possible now than it did a couple of years ago, that that's something that could be done by just an artist who has a few drawings could have an entire game world based on their style.
My sense is that like game development is not going to actually change that much, except for the people who are developing and designing are going to be able to prototype faster, and some of their jobs, some of their tasks will actually be able to be executed faster, because what is it? A productivity tool after all. But in the end, there's a lot to building games, and some of the people who have been maybe novice or amateur game makers may have a better opportunity now to do some interesting things. But I still think this is going to be largely utilized by the companies that are already or the people, the professionals and the companies that are already building games.
Yeah, but it just extends down the it used to be that if you were a layperson, you can maybe do a text game and that was it. But now, of course, there's a lot of art generating tools out there. And now with this, it goes from being able to have a few images to go with your text story to having an entire 3D world to go with your text story.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're running up on time here, so let's do a couple quick hitters. So LinkedIn launches generative AI writing assistant, and it's just for profiles and job descriptions. I haven't seen it. I've been looking for it. I think because of our plan, I should have access to it, but I don't. But this seems sort of obvious. Like, so Microsoft owns LinkedIn. If people don't remember that, they have this. They own 49% of, or at least rumored to own 49% of OpenAI. You would think they would start putting GPT-3, GPT-4 type features in there. This is just the start. I think one of the things I think is really interesting about LinkedIn in this space is, what about content generation? So this whole idea of who you are and your authenticity, and they've really pushed that content. It's your resume, and that's their primary feature. Hiring is their second primary feature, and that's their primary revenue feature. But then the question is, do they just want it to be an AI content factory like so many blogs are out there?
Yeah, I think it's it's a really useful idea, especially because there are a lot of people who, you know, they're what the kind of job they want or the kind of jobs they're looking for do not necessarily involve creative writing or writing about themselves. So having something that can turn their resume into a little short narrative is really great. And you know, at a time when at least you hear all the time about especially tech companies desperately looking for new people to hire, something that can speed up the process of writing all those job descriptions would be very valuable. And you know, it's also telling that at the same time, LinkedIn's always trying to draw people in with whatever they can, and they have a new 100 new courses on AI. 20 of them are on generative AI. I think they really want to make, as much as they made GitHub a home for generative AI projects, they want to do the same for LinkedIn in a more business sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so the last thing we want to bring up, and then we'll just close out on some of the comments that we have here too, is SoundHound. So SoundHound, they launched a generative AI, chat AI. It's supposed to be a voice assistant. It seems to me that it's very similar to what we've seen before from them. Maybe repackaged. It sounds. We talked to them. It sounds like that some things have changed, and there is some generative elements. Some of it's repackaging. They say some of the things they had generative all along. What's your take on it?
Yeah, so it's essentially there's a mobile app, and then there's a platform for their enterprise projects. They're very invested in working with restaurants and car companies and so on to build voice assistants for them, and now they want generative AI to be part of that. I've played around with the mobile app. It does sort of feel like I'm just having a vocal conversation with ChatGPT to a certain extent. Except when I ask about more immediate things, or things that are happening around me locally or nearby restaurants or things like that. It's not a bad idea. I think having a better voice assistant than Siri is nice. And as they point out, you know, it's faster to tell it what to do by voice than it is to type it, even though reading it is faster than hearing it read back to you. But you know, if I'm in the car and if I, for whatever reason, want to have a more in-depth conversation about what kind of, where to go to dinner or something, it's nice. And I think the voice AI aspect of generative AI chatbots has already been played with a bit, but I think it's going to become a standard feature. It's going to have to be at some point. So it makes sense that SoundHound wants to get ahead on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple of things on it. So first of all, you know, I always thought the Hound voice assistant was actually quite good, particularly for independents. And they're positioning this the consumer app, and you had test flight access, so you had early access. And I don't even know if the consumer app is out yet. We can check after. But a couple of things about it. So first of all, it's a demonstration app. They're still B2B. They're still trying to get people to use their services. Is a platform to build, you know, for enterprise companies to build on. So that's the first thing I would tell people. I think they should do a consumer app, but they keep saying no. So maybe one of these days they'll say, oh, this is just like great. So that's one thing that I think would be interesting for people to know. The other is it's still LLM, or excuse me, it's still NLU first. So for those of you who don't know, natural language understanding, most of the people in the room right now will understand that. The NLU, they already had an arbitrator because a lot of their implementations in automotive required that because they're supporting multiple assistants. So I had to come in and figure out what's the query, where do I send it? And the way they characterize it is like an LLM is one of the potential places that query can get routed. And so I think that's also the other thing for people to think about, where there's some other people who are doing some things with ChatGPT, which is LLM first. It's LLM in, LLM out. If you are working with SoundHound, basically they're telling you we can support LLMs. It's just basically another client, and generative client on the system. But when it comes in, the SoundHound NLU is going to figure out what the intent is, and then it's going to decide whether it's going to go to one of its deterministic responses from its database of knowledge, or its partner database of knowledge, or an LLM, which is another source.
Yeah, I mean, it's a question. Yeah, it's a question of direction. If you start with one or the other, and SoundHound has a very deep history and presence in NLU. It can sell itself to its existing and potential customers as being the NLU company that now has generative AI, as opposed to a generative AI company that now has NLU. I think there's going to be, especially for enterprise services for businesses that really want customer service voices that understand what people are saying. I think they're going to prefer that approach, but it just depends on if OpenAI comes out with a voice assistant that does everything even better than what SoundHound does.
All right, so we ran a little long, but we're just going to close out on some of the Google things. Michael Stanislaw said Google feels more and more like Nokia. I put this up earlier, but McCall, the catch is that Google's been at this for at least 10 years and it hasn't really changed. And Silky Han followed up saying the cemetery of Google products is a running gag over here. That's at Heisa Online. So check out Silka's comments over there. There are a lot of links to the stories that we talked about today. Some of them are in LinkedIn. When we're running this live, it actually, our live chat actually only goes to YouTube. So if anyone just goes over to youtube.com/the @Voicebot you'll be able to see in the live video section and in the chat in there, you should be able to see some of the links. Plus, we'll update the description. So if you want to go do that, we're going to try to keep these things usually to 35 minutes. We went to 45 today, but there's been a lot of work. And somebody actually complained to me this week on social media, said, last week's was way too short. We should have gone longer. So this week we did. And but I'm still going to try to make this short and in the future so people can get a quick rundown of what's going on. There's just so much going on. Eric Schwartz, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, looking forward to next week.
All right, folks. Until next week. Bye-bye.